First podcast, We the People, the Exhausted Majority, Tim Ryan. What are you doing here? What are we doing here?
I'm excited. This is really great, Parker. Great to be with you. Our inaugural podcast. We are kicking off. We have kicked off We the People. Now, this is the first We the People podcast. This is the home for the exhausted majority. And we are going to fight the anti-democratic forces in the country for sure. But this is a bipartisan effort to try to heal the country. And we really want to focus on all the really cool shit that's going on in America that I've discovered over my 20 years in Congress of really innovative programs, whether it's education or healthcare or veterans, economic development, food. We're gonna really explore a lot of really cool stuff happening in the country where ordinary people are doing extraordinary things. We're going to amplify that with really compelling content, and we're going to try to help organize to move the needle on some of these issues. And we are going to have more fun than any other political organization in the entire United States of America. Extremely low bar, but we are going to have a lot of fun.
We are. And the title of this podcast, and this title for the reason, is The Exhausted Majority. And I think that a lot of people feel that they're exhausted. I think a lot of people maybe not know that they're in the majority, that the majority of America is exhausted. How did you kind of come up with that phrase? Like how did that click for you?
I don't even remember whether I first heard it or said it, or it came from different, sometimes, thoughts and ideas and phrases just kind of evolve. But when I first started hearing it or saying it, it was like, man, that really resonates. And then it was resonating with, during the Senate campaign here in Ohio, it was resonating with a lot of people that I was meeting on the campaign trail, that there was a real exhaustion out there. And as you just said, like a lot of people turn on TV and they're like, oh my God, everybody's nuts. Oh my God, everybody's running around with their hair on fire. Oh my God, everyone's looking to get in a fight with somebody. And like, I want to be a good citizen. I want to be engaged. I want to vote. I want to participate, but I'm not getting in this fucking mess. Like I got other shit I want to do. And I certainly don't want to be in a fight with my neighbors. And I think we've all experienced over the last few years of, having fights with family members and just conflict out the wazoo. So I think just acknowledging first and foremost that there are millions of people who are exhausted. There are millions of people who love America more than the political party they belong to. There are a lot of people who really feel like there's cool things happening in the country, that there is a way forward, but they just don't see it on the political shows. They don't see it on TV, because that's not how you sell ads or how you get eyeballs. You got to have the conflict. And so we're creating a space here where we're going to have disagreements, we're going to have arguments maybe even, and hopefully we handle those in an appropriate way.
As we should.
And we want to do it with some humor too. We want this to be a place where, we'll have comedians and people who provide us some social insight through humor. I think we've lost that in society. It's become humorless in a lot of ways, where everyone's walking on eggshells. Everyone's afraid to say anything. And we hope we can bring that back. We're not here to hurt anybody's feelings, but we are here to have a little bit of fun along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem more and more that politics, it's like walking through more mud than at Burning Man this year. Just which this is a call out for any comedian who is listening who has better jokes than we do. That is the bar that we are setting. So please come and help us, because it's not getting any better. Not getting any better than that from us. But it's a slog. I've worked on campaigns for a long time. You've obviously, you were in office for 20 years. You've worked on campaigns before. Do you remember a time where politics used to be this much of a slog, this much of a hard traveled journey, where it's just so off-putting?
No, I don't. I mean, I got into Congress in then so I ran in the state Senate. I was running when Al Gore ran, and then it was the whole Supreme Court thing. And then I got into Congress in 2003, like right after 9/11. And then the anti-war protests started. Kids your age may not remember all that. It seemed like yesterday.
I walked out. I walked out of my high school.
Third grade class? Oh, you're not. I told my third grade teacher I am not staying in this classroom while this war is going on. No, but it was, it was super, super polarizing. I mean, it was, it was a whole anti-war effort. Went to war with, really shoddy kind of intelligence. It was pretty cooked up, and so there was a lot of people pissed off, and for a good reason. And then in 2006, the Democrats took over because George Bush and the Republicans were prosecuting the war. Even in 2007, 2008, we were able to pass budgets. I remember George Bush signed an increase in the minimum wage in one of the budgets that we had. I mean, just think about that. It's insane. Like a Republican president with a Democratic Congress, increasing the minimum wage, and we made certain investments and started to try to unwind the war. But government was still working, like it was still happening. There wasn't any of this bullshit like you're getting with Kevin McCarthy. We're going to shut the government down. We're going to it's insane what's happening today. So government was still functioning. So now today, it's just gotten completely out of hand and got more polarized, and then more social media, more to the extremes than you could ever remember.
Yeah, even hearkening back, I remember like the Tucker Carlson, Jon Stewart kind of debate that kind of ended Crossfire. Kind of, I think one of the great political debate shows of its time.
Mm-hmm.
And now I kind of think about that, and I'm just like, please bring that back. Like I'll take that debate any day. And now, as a juxtaposition, we have Tucker Carlson on Elon Musk's like X Twitter, whatever he'll decide to call it next, interviewing, and this has gotten like more than like 70 million views, this teaser of this man who has said that he smoked crack and had sex with Barack Obama. Like, that trajectory is insane. I mean, it's just insane. And a lot of times we wonder, and we're like, I just want more people to be checked in. I want more people to be engaged. Why aren't people voting? Why aren't people volunteering? Why aren't people giving money? Why aren't people excited to have these conversations? And it's just those two little brackets of a reasonable conversation where Tucker Carlson got owned by Jon Stewart to now Barack Obama, sex and crack. I mean,
yeah,
crazy.
I mean, the problem is, like years ago, if somebody said that, pre-internet or pre-whatever, you'd be the weirdo. Like you'd be the guy who'd be like, this guy over here, like, stay away from him. You tell your kids, like, now they get 70 million views.
Yeah.
Now it's a thing, and it's and then it always falls into the the cultural prism of red or blue. So if it's Tucker Carlson and it's anti-Barack Obama, tell me more about it. And instead of responsible people saying like, yeah, you're get out.
Yeah.
Get out.
Stop,
just
please.
We just don't do that anymore. And that's the problem. I mean, everybody has a microphone and everybody can speak into it. And unfortunately, people watch.
Yes. Says two dudes with a podcast,
with microphones.
With microphones.
That really work. Like, this is not a prop. This is like a real.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's connected. We see the cord and everything.
Wire. Yeah, there's a wire there. Beautiful thing.
Um, I know that this summer, and you are always, but I know that this summer I was pretty focused on Ohio. I was pretty like looking at Ohio. I was looking at the, um, the kind of the pseudo abortion issue, vote that they put just in the, just in the
Yeah.
dead heat of summer. What was that all about? And what is, as Ohio is cruising into its next kind of off year general election with abortion on the ballot, as well as recreational marijuana, what's happening in your state, in your communities? Like, what's the conversation there like?
Yeah, Ohio's a very interesting state, as we all know. It really is kind of a bellwether still. I know people want to think it's super Republican state. We have a Democratic senator in Sherrod Brown, and over the years with gerrymandering and and other things, it's become a very red state for state office holders, but it's pretty much down the middle. And so when we have periodically from time to time, we'll have these ballot initiatives that come up that don't have a D or an R by their name. Like the National Democratic Party brand in Ohio is very toxic in the state. And so the D by your name can really hurt candidates here. But you get an issue on the ballot that people just look at the issue, and people tend to vote probably a little bit center left. If I had to guess, we had a back in 2011, we had a right to work initiative on the ballot to really bust the unions here, and we organized and campaigned, put it on the ballot, and we won that with 63% of the votes. So you say, well, this is a red state, but it was a straight working class issue, wins with 63%. Then we just had something on the ballot a few weeks back, and it was about raising the threshold to pass a constitutional amendment from, instead of being able to pass it with 50% plus one, the Republicans here were trying to raise it to 60%. So you needed 60% of the vote in order to pass an initiative. And they did that to try to prevent an abortion initiative from coming on the ballot this November. So that initiative to raise the threshold to 57 or to 60% went down with 57% of the vote. It was seen as taking rights away. It was seen as an abortion thing and a women's rights thing. Went down with 57% because there wasn't a D by their name. So now in the fall, we have a marijuana legalization initiative on the ballot, and we have an abortion initiative on the ballot in November. And there's a pretty good chance that both of those will pass. And we're going to work really hard with We the People and other groups here, and I'll be active around the state in the coming months. I think both of those will pass. So you'll look at Ohio and you'll say, well, they supported unions 10 years ago. They protected rights for women, this year. They legalized marijuana this year. Like, that's kind of looking like a pretty normal thinking state. And it does speak to the Democratic brand, I think, more than anything. But Ohio is really ground zero for a lot of stuff going on in the country now. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. And I believe it was last year, Montana, which has a Democratic senator, but is pretty much viewed now as, a pretty red state. They beat back right to work in the legislative kind of process, is that they were going to put a vote in, and the gerrymandered, Republicans, et cetera, they actually got enough pressure to be like, no, we're not going to do it. Yeah. So it is interesting that if we start taking away the partisan, kind of ownership over issues, that you allow people to be okay to kind of act as Americans, right? Like, I think that what is the support of unions in the country? Pretty high. I mean, certainly the right to organize, the right to talk with your other workers to be like, hey, maybe we want better, we want better wages, we want better treatment, we want better protections. That it's a full blown, people are like, yes, I want that.
Yeah,
So
100%. I was on the phone the other day. I've got a very, very good friend who's a Republican, but super, super libertarian. And it was me and another Democrat. And we were talking to this guy, and it was like a day after Labor Day. And I got on the call a minute or two late, and my Democratic friend said, "Hey, I was just talking to our buddy here about how libertarian labor unions are. Like, how do we keep the government from interfering into a worker's right to create a contract with another worker free of government intervention in order to leverage their power to have a contract with the company?" Sounds pretty
yeah.
sounds pretty libertarian to me. Right of association right there in the Constitution. I mean, it's yeah, I think if you strip away, all the accoutrements that have kind of clinged on, the barnacles that have like clinged on to these issues over the years and made them look something like really, really different than they really are at their core, and how they've gotten twisted into, funding, by libertarians like the Koch brothers to be anti-union because that was good for business and, reduce wages for labor. Or the companies that offshore jobs out of the United States from, places like Youngstown, Ohio, Warren, Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, to move the jobs over to Mexico, get rid of the unions, go from $30 an hour plus wages and benefits and pensions to like $2 an hour. I mean, we literally had people leaving Warren, Ohio. It was the Delphi Corporation at that point, but they would close the factory down in Warren, Ohio. They would put it right over the border in Mexico, and then literally had the workers in Ohio like go down and train the Mexican workers to take their jobs. And you wonder why workers are so pissed. But like those companies, of course, they're against unions, right? They just wanted to bust the union, and then when they couldn't bust the union, they just picked up and put the factory somewhere else. I mean, it's literally a Bruce Springsteen song. So here we are, but I think if we can get down to like, what's freedom really mean? We talked a lot in our election around the issue of a woman's right to choose. It's a freedom issue. I think the marijuana legalization, it's a freedom issue, right? I mean, like, leave people alone unless they're harming somebody else, and like keep the government out of people's bedroom, keep the government away from a woman's body. Like, they have no business in there. But it's hilarious to think like a libertarian who doesn't want the government in anything is okay with the government telling a woman what to do with her body. That doesn't jive.
Yeah. The grand hypocrisy. And also, speaking from somebody from Washington State, legalizing marijuana is a fantastic tax revenue and a good way to pay for schools. And why not?
The weed, man, has a great ripple effect throughout the society. Well, and then you have like, I mean, the issues around stem cells. You have issues around around marijuana, around cannabinoids, around all of this stuff. Like, we're finding out like the research and the medical applications. This is recreational. It's on the ballot here. We do have medical in Ohio, but like, there's a lot of benefits to to some of these things that someone coming in with like a moral crusade and wanting to inject their moral values onto somebody. It's not really kind of an American thing. It shouldn't be anyway.
And so we've talked about kind of like the toxicity of Tucker Carlson, and like in all sides of the media, and how people want to turn off. We talk about how if we kind of strip away that toxicity, people tend to vote with knowledge. They tend to vote with compassion. They tend to vote with kind of understanding of these basic principles. And one of the things that we want to do at We the People and are doing is how, like, giving people another way to participate in this great American journey, which I think is a little bit of a recognition of some of these extraordinary things that are happening. Like, the United States is not going down in a fireball. We are, like, things are bad, certainly, and things are bad for, for some folks, but there are great things that are happening. There are great kind of ways. And even speaking to kind of, weed, mushrooms, other forms of medical treatment, that's happening. And that, and I think that you've had some pretty good conversations with people about what the results of those are.
When we started putting We the People together, to me, it was really about all of the cool stuff. For 20 years in Congress, you see a lot of bullshit, and then that's kind of the stuff that is on TV and all the conflict, and you see, but you see underneath that, you see ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You see solutions. You see innovations in healthcare. You see innovations in, we're talking about psilocybin or MDMA, which are therapies that are helping veterans heal. Like, we've had this huge problem since the Iraq War of vets coming back. You'd have, for the longest time, it was 22 suicides a day for veterans. It's an unbelievable statistic. I think it's down to 18 or 19 maybe now. But there, in all I kept seeing was docs who were just giving prescription drugs to these vets. And sometimes they would be on 10, 12, 14 different prescription drugs a day. I'm like, this is insane. Like, this cannot be the way to do it. And through my own journey of, yoga and meditation, I started to wander into these other areas of therapies. And we've seen what, for example, what Rick Doblin's doing over at MAPS, which is doing a ton of research on this with MDMA, with psilocybin, and it's healing our vets. So you can take a vet who's been severely traumatized, Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, and they go through these therapies it's monitored by medical professionals. And they, over 2 or 3 sessions, they're 80% healed, 90% healed, and they're able to then get off of these medicines and get back to a working life, a productive life, being productive dads, good spouses, paying taxes, contributing, which is what people who've been trained in the military and want to serve want to do. And so what we want to do, We the People, we want to highlight that. We want to video these vets who have been healed. We want to understand what they've been through and how this process worked for them. We want to understand how the research is working. And then not just do a compelling video. I mean, we're not Netflix, although we may have some compelling videos that may be better than Netflix. But we also want to have a component where, now, how do we organize the vets who have healed from this, other vets who understand vets who have healed from that, their families, their friends. They had a conference out in Colorado a few months back. They had 12,000 people there that were at a conference for MDMA and in MAPS and how do we heal vets. And so we want to amplify that, because just think if we could amplify and then organize all of those people who have benefited from MDMA with vets, have healed from that, their family. We organize that group as a political operation, not a Democrat, not a Republican, but saying, how do we move the needle in states to allow this to happen? How do we move the needle in Washington, D.C. so we get more funding for these things, more research for this? How do we get it into the VA system? Think about what we can do. I mean, if we accomplish nothing more, We the People, or in the United States in the next 10 years, if we took the vet suicide number from 20 a day to 2 a day, it'd be like, what more could you do with your life?
Huge win.
That's what we want to do. And then you look at cannabis, cannabinoids, and how it heals with addiction. And good buddy of mine, Bernie Kosar, who used to be the Browns quarterback, went through this whole process through addiction, because the NFL was pumping players with painkillers for years and years and years and years. And here's our guy Bernie got into that, and then used cannabinoids and others substances like that to heal himself, and now he's thriving. He's doing great. I mean, so why would we want to highlight that and then organize it and then make the case of why the government needs to innovate? That's what we want to do. We the people. This is not going to be, we're going to be pushing ideas that haven't worked or have no chance of getting us anywhere or just going to cause fights. Healing addiction, is that a red state or a blue state? Forget all that stuff. We want to try to heal. And if we approach it around the issues that are able to heal and are innovative, like let the pundits and everybody say it's Democrat or Republican thing. And let me just say before I finish this rant that I'm on, like what I love about it is like, okay, take the vet issue. From the left, it would be like, well, healing, kind of, we've got to take care of our vets. This is a healthcare thing. This is a trauma thing. We've got to heal. And that would generally be perceived as like, oh, that's a progressive, touchy-feely kind of thing. But it's also vets, so it's kind of like more of a conservative, Republican, thing. But then you talk about like, we're going to put this vet on 14 different meds over the next 30 or 40 years. Like, it's not going to end well, and it's going to be a terrible life for the vet. But it's also going to be very, very expensive, right? Or we could do these therapies that may cost a little bit of money up front. So if you're like a hardcore fiscal conservative, like we're telling you how we're going to save a ton of money in the VA budget over the years by making these really smart, innovative investments up front. I think there are so many issues like that, Parker, across the board in our society where it's both.
Yeah.
It's both. It's both a progressive idea because it's new and not in the mainstream, maybe just yet. And it's a conservative idea because it's going to save a bunch of money, which makes it an American idea. It's that simple.
That sounds pretty good. Sounds like you're saying for the partisans out there that some of these things are yes and. Yes, I'm a Republican and I support healing vets. Yes, I'm a Democrat and I support healing vets. Like,
right.
When did we stop just at yes? Yes, I'm a Democrat, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, and you look at like a Teddy Roosevelt or like a William McKinley, who was from my hometown, like that. They were Republicans, but they were ushering in the progressive era in American politics. I mean, look, Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. I mean, he was the one around conservation. He was one supporting workers, supporting labor unions, building infrastructure, and those kind of things, because being progressive means being American. You're like, we're innovative. We have a free society. We don't have the Communist Party or Vladimir Putin telling us what we can and cannot think. They don't have a free press. They don't have free ideas. That kind of sucks sometimes when you hear like anybody can say anything. Everyone has their own microphone here. There's a downside. And we've talked about that. The upside of that is you get constant innovation. But I pulled out this $1 bill. If you look on the back of your $1 bill, there's a pyramid.
I don't carry cash anymore. So
yeah, I know. Well, you can Venmo yourself a picture or like Google a picture of a $1 bill. But on the $1 bill it's the eye of reason that's at the top of the pyramid, and that's what the founding fathers of America wanted: a country based on reason, based on thought, based on debate, not based on religion, not based on what the king said, but on the man's ability to reason. And I think, we the people, we want to, certainly encourage that. And that means research, science, like all of these things that should be honored here really is the path forward for us to try to solve some of these problems that, as I said, just with the vets, the last 20 years made zero headway on this. Well, now we have some really smart people come up with a way to use these, pharmaceuticals or mushrooms or whatever to heal.
Yeah.
But,
whatever way we get to the end. Yeah. It's like you said once, I forget what's radical pragmatism or
Radically pragmatic. Yeah.
Yeah. Just,
Yeah.
and I think that then
Or
you said, I just want to get shit done.
yes,
Just get
sir.
shit done.
That sounds like something I'd say.
It does, right? Yeah.
It does. It does. Or you could like, if you really want to like boil it down into an American cultural moment, it's like when Adrian told Rocky it was okay to like go fight Apollo Creed, and Mickey says, "What are we waiting for?" You're gonna get all the wisdom you need out of like Rocky movies. Let's be
Yeah,
honest. Yeah,
absolutely.
it's a beautiful thing.
So both of us have been involved in campaigns and politics for a while. And it's hard. It's like it's a hard life. They've made movies about it. I don't think any movie has ever really said what a campaign is.
See
Are
all this
you
gray hair? That's gray
well,
hair.
I'm 36 years old and I have gray hair. So it's not looking good. Not looking good.
Not looking good.
You look wonderful. I'm going to look terrible.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's all the golf for you though. I have other things I do. And
That's
but
a
it
whole
is
other podcast, Parker.
yeah,
I want to do a whole other podcast on what does Parker do when he's not.
We the people
podcast?
after dark, There you go. But I started working on campaigns, working in politics. I started having a really tough time sleeping. I had a really tough time sleeping. And I would never be able to turn it off. There's always something to do. There's always something you have to do, because this is all very important for the people who are kind of in this. This is, in some sense, you can boil it down to life and death. And I started doing sleep meditations. Like somebody just said, you have to fix this because you are starting to lose your mind. And I was like, you're right. Very true. And there was like, you have to start sleeping. And so I started doing sleep meditations. And then, something that I think, I've always felt so compelling about you is that you talk openly about meditation, about mindfulness, about how we need to pay attention to the most important kind of part of our lives, which is just our brain and body being able to function. How did you start? Like, I had a crisis moment. I don't know if you had a crisis moment or you want to share your crisis moment, but how did it start percolating up for you?
Yeah, years of crisis added up.
The Congress, right?
I can't identify that one moment. Yeah. I had learned about, I had a great priest. I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school for 13 years. And I had a buddy of mine take me to see a Catholic priest who we both knew. But this Catholic priest was like this huge meditator. And he, Father Crumley, and he ran St. James Parish in Warren, Ohio. It was just a couple blocks from my high school. Very working class. It was like in a kind of a tough neighborhood in Warren, Ohio. And he said, "Hey, Father," I kept talking about meditation, and he said, "You should go talk to Father Crumley about this." And so we went to see Father Crumley. I was probably, I don't know, early. I know I was out of high school, but not much out of high school, just a few years. And so we go to see Father Crumley, and he taught us centering prayer. And he was very much into like positive energy and negative energy. And centering prayer was a Catholic-based, Christian-based meditation that's like 1,200 years old. And there were these mystics that a lot of them are saints now. In the Catholic Church, who would have these deep meditation. They call them the Desert Fathers. And Father Crumley taught us this technique of you have a word. It's basically a mantra. The Hindus have all kinds of mantra-based meditations. But you have this mantra that you say, and as your mind goes to different places, you come back to your mantra. And it could be love, it could be Jesus, it could be God. It was like obviously very Christian-based. And he taught me that, and it was like, this is really powerful stuff. And I would do it on and off. And then, so that was kind of the beginning of the journey. And at that same time, like I grew up in like the 80s and 90s, watching Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls and Phil Jackson, who was their coach. And Phil Jackson was a huge Zen Buddhist who taught the team Zen meditation. He did yoga with them. He did a bunch of these Indian rituals. So I started reading Phil Jackson's book called Sacred Hoops. And in his book, he had books that he read. One of them was Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And so I went out and I bought all these books that Phil Jackson read. And that was the journey. And then I did a couple like day-long 2-day retreats, silent, like no talking, no whatever. And that
pretty tough for a politician, I imagine. That was a tough thing to
do. Yeah. I think my first one I was in the state Senate, maybe. But then in 2008, this was kind of the big moment. In 2008, I'd been in Congress for maybe 5 or 6 years. The war was going on. We're dealing with all these vets coming back, just heartbreaking stuff. And, a lot of just stuff started coming to a head. And I was like, I wasn't burnout, but I was like, I think I'm going to be burnout. And I was reading more about this stuff. And I heard about this guy named John Kabat-Zinn. And he had his book sent to every member of Congress. His book was called Coming to Our Senses. And it was all about the, secular mindfulness meditation. Anyway, long story short, I got hooked up into a retreat, right? And I booked it right after the 2008 election. And so, because I was traveling the state, I'm campaigning for Obama. 2 years before, I was campaigning for Sherrod Brown and Ted Strickland in the state races in Ohio. I was just like starting to get really exhausted majority. And I went to this retreat. It was 5 days, no talking, no journaling, no TV. There's a little bit of talking, like as he like kind of brought you in, and then in the middle there's like a day and a half, 2 days of complete silence. And it just blew the top off my head. Like you could start to see, like the first day you're like, I need to call somebody. Who? Anybody who just wants to talk, and then you just kind of settle in. Do you ever see if you put a milk jug with a bunch of, stuff in it, filled it with water, and you shook it like a bunch of sand, and you'd set it down, and the sand would just like settle to the bottom of the milk jug. That's kind of what happens to your mind. Your mind just boom. And then it becomes very, very clear. And then you could start seeing all the fucked up shit you start saying to yourself in your own head because no one's talking. And normally you have some anxiety and you start thinking about it and you like turn the radio on, or you put your headphones in, or you make a call, or you get on your phone and distract yourself from that anxiety. And what you learn in these retreats is like you let it emerge and you just look at it, and it's not real. It's just not real. It's just a thought, and your mind just generates thoughts based on all kinds of energies flowing through your body. And I just realized that this is like a super powerful thing that like, especially like I was seeing all this in connection with my work, my political work, and like with vets. And I just like at the end, I had this complete like breakdown. I started crying at the end of the retreat, and I just was like overwhelmed with emotion. And I went up, and John Kabat-Zinn ran the retreat, and I went up to John. I'm like, John, Jesus, man, we got to get this to our vets. Like, do a bunch of education stuff. I'm like, our kids need this. Like, our kids are traumatized. Like, this would be phenomenal for them to, in healthcare and all this. And he's like, well, there's a lot going on, and I would love to meet with you and talk to you about, what we could do to like, I could point you in the right direction. And that was the beginning of the book I wrote, now Healing America, which has sections about vets and healthcare and education and how these kind of practices could be really helpful. And it stemmed because it helped me. It just helped me kind of deal with the insanity of life. And if you don't have, I've come to realize that now that I've turned 50, like if you don't have tools, you need tools. Like you can't just say, I want to reduce my stress. or I want to feel better. Like, you need tools to be able to do that. And some of the things we talked about with cannabinoids and MDMA and psilocybin, I think, can really accelerate a lot of the healing that can happen, and that's being proven out. But you need some tools day to day to, like, you used to tell us growing up, like, take a deep breath, count to 10. Well, now it's like count to a fucking 100, because
shit's bad out
sit
there.
right here. Yeah, sit right here. Count to 100. You'll be good. So
yeah,
that's kind of how it got started. And I think, and this is one of the initiatives we really want to do with We the People. And we sent out last week, Father Keating, Thomas Keating, who was one of the leaders in America around promoting centering prayer and bringing it back, is that we want to be not a clearinghouse, but like almost a place where you can come and like, we can kind of point you in the right direction. Like, here's what the Catholics do. Here's what the Hindus do. Here's what the Jewish folks do. Here's all their meditations. Like, you don't have to, you can stay in your own lane, stay in your own religion. There's something there for you. And we want to continue to kind of promote those ideas. Again, not just the stuff we talked about earlier, but like, what are those techniques? If you're into yoga or you want to try yoga, like these breath practices. I've been in, there's a great group called Art of Living. The leader is Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, who started the group, but they have a program called Project Welcome Home Troops. It's like a series of ancient, deep breathing techniques. And I've been through these sessions with these veterans, and the vets come, and it's like a 5-day thing. It's like 3 or 4 hours a day. And they learn these super intense breathing. And then a meditation after. And I've seen these vets go through this program. I sponsored a bunch here in Ohio a while back, and they come in, and after 5 days, I don't want to say they're healed, but they're like 70% better. And they went from, like, literally, you can watch videos about this program, like, where guys literally had guns pointed at their kids. That's how messed up they were. And they go through this program, and they're back, and they're like happy. And they basically just use these really intense breathing techniques to process the trauma that they had out of their nervous system. Because your body, there's a book called Body Keeps Score. And like, you hold this stuff in your body. It's not like it's like going to just disappear. That's why people look older, because, they get bent over, or their organs deteriorate, or you get an ulcer. There's this interaction between what you're doing every day and your body holds this. So these breathing techniques help you process it. And so again, like, let's get back to the whole idea we were talking about earlier, like, okay, progressive idea, new. Let's talk about healthcare costs, right? Like, if we're like able to teach kids in school how to process stress, how to process trauma, and release it out of your nervous system, because that trauma will affect your cognitive functions. Again, you get an ulcer, you start to get a little bit depressed. Like, there's some mental health that absolutely needs, you need medication and you need professional treatment, but there's a lot of us that are like on the border, like kind of depressed. Like, why? Because you're holding all this stuff, and it starts to change your biochemistry. So the deep breathing is just one example of being able to process the trauma, release the trauma, bring some harmony back into your body and mind. And it's cheap. Like, we're not spending, you're not medicating everybody, because big pharma wants everybody on like medicine so that they can make a bunch of money and, increase their stock prices. So again, at We the People, we want to like highlight this stuff because it's out there and it's working. Like, they have trained thousands. I did a call today with a guy who works at Akron Children's Hospital, complete doctor, complete cynic about this kind of stuff. And he heard, well, Tim Ryan does this stuff. And so we did an introductory thing with the people at Akron Children's Hospital. He's the biggest advocate for It's not called the Power Breath Workshop, but we did it during the pandemic for frontline healthcare workers.
Mm-hmm.
Cool as shit. Like they loved it because they had no other way. Like, there's only so much wine you can drink to like try to like after long days at work in the middle of the pandemic, like you have to be able to. I'm not saying wine's not a good short-term solution. It's just not a good mid to
Of
long-term
course.
solution.
Yeah.
But to be able to process that trauma in a really simple way in creating environments. So we will have these kind of signposts for people to, and a little bit of some resources to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah. And that's the theory of change, right? That's the whole 9 yards, is that you have to, or whole 10 yards, I guess is the saying, but you have to, I think whole 9 yards is like a Bruce Willis movie.
You're like never good at math, but that's the whole other.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
We'll save that for We the People After Dark.
Yeah,
that's
right.
another
Well,
segment.
we'll edit this out for sure. The theory is that if we just highlight these things that the doctor is doing for the frontline workers, that we highlight the studies that are actually having success, if we highlight, we didn't talk about it, but we will, regenerative agriculture and food as medicine, that these things, that these are happening, and they're not happening under the guise of Democrats or Republicans. It's just Americans doing what Americans do best, which is solving problems and just doing what they need to do to survive.
Doing cool stuff and helping people, helping heal, whether it's heal vets, heal frontline workers, heal trauma, heal the earth, heal the soil. Like that's, I think if there's a general theme throughout like my work in Congress, if there's a word, it's healing. Like we're trying to heal. We're trying to heal the planet. We're trying to heal the soil. We're trying to heal veterans. We're trying to heal kids. I mean, just like there's been so much trauma to the earth, to the ground, to each other. Really, you go back to like Vietnam. You start if we can all just take a deep breath and just say it's okay. This is just where we are, and how do we want to agree to move forward, and how are we going to treat each other with a little bit of compassion? Because you think about like people my mom's age, and you think about them going to school as kids, and they went to school and they had to get under the desk for an air raid drill during the Cold War.
I don't really quite remember what that was. That was so long ago.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I don't really remember it either. But I read about it and heard about it, and so think about it. So that's like that generation. As kids, clearly that's like a screwed up thing. Not that maybe it was necessary, maybe it wasn't, but it was kind of. I'm sure it was like traumatizing to kids. That same like generation ended up in Vietnam through the war, the Cold War of the 60s. They saw a president get assassinated. They saw the president's brother get assassinated. They saw Martin Luther King get assassinated. They saw Malcolm X get assassinated. Then Vietnam War. Then the riots, the protests through the 70s, and as all of this is happening, the deindustrialization of the United States happened. So back to the Bruce Springsteen, song of, Born in the USA, or a song about Youngstown. So all of a sudden that first rung that my grandfather didn't graduate from high school could grab and work till 1980 and like have a good life, that became almost not available. All of this runs parallel for the next, however many decades. And now you have kids that are afraid to go to school because of school shootings, continue the economic kind of stagnation for most working class people, institutions that have completely failed them, whether it's the scandals of the political scandals, but the scandal of the Catholic Church, the scandal of the Boy Scouts, like all of these institutions that used to like help like kids work through this stuff. Those, are less impactful today because of some of those scandals. And, those, those things are all like now they're coming to a head now today. So you've got the oldest generation of air raid drills in Vietnam, and you have the youngest generation now with his school shootings and fentanyl and overdose deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan and the 20 vets a day suicide. That's a lot of fucking trauma. And so if we don't like recognize that like that is the underlying issue that we're dealing with here, not to mention the industrialization of our food, and poisoning our rivers and dumping environmental issues around the world, plastic in the ocean, like on and on. Like, okay, like this is why we're exhausted.
Yeah.
This is a pretty screwed up scenario, right? You wonder why I'm checking out because no one knows what they're doing. Like this is completely screwed up. You got young people saying thanks for the great society you left us. But President Kennedy had a great quote, and I think it was in his peace speech at American University: "Our problems are man-made, and therefore they can be solved by man. Man can be as big as he wants, and there's no problem that we can't solve." And so I think we have to, we may post that on our website, like that needs to be like, we created most of this ourselves, which means we have the capacity to solve it. And then, then there's Einstein who said, you solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. We hope that this, organization here is really a clearinghouse for some of those ideas and conversations that need to happen, which I think could be really cool and probably a pretty decent contribution to the, to the world.
Well, you said after your Senate campaign that you were going to continue the fight. So thank you.
Here we are. Just the beginning. We're going to have a little fun along the way. Just a little fun along the way.
And I think that concludes our inaugural episode. Thank you for tuning in to The Exhausted Majority, produced by We the People, with your host Tim Ryan and myself, Parker Butterworth. If you're interested in our journey about how we heal America, then follow along, like, subscribe. And you can always sign up for our emails at www.wethepeople250.us.